Hello, welcome to Superpower Broadcasting. I'm your host, Kevin Castley. Thank you for tuning in tonight. We've got Spook Fuel here. We're going to be discussing an egregious law of barbarity that's been passed in Texas and upholded by the Supreme Court today in a pretty sus manner. And basically, what this law does now is essentially empowers citizens within Texas to go about enforcing the terms of this, which are that any abortions over approximately 6 weeks after medical professionals can detect cardiac activity in the fetus, those are banned. And these account for about 85% of abortions in Texas. And in addition to this is the state offering $10,000 bounties to individual people in Texas for ratting out anybody who, in any way, is, as they say, aiding and abetting abortions to take place. For example, if you know somebody driving somebody to an abortion, obviously the clinics as well are liable here. And what it does is essentially empowers individual conservative citizens in Texas to sue, to file a civil suit and be rewarded up to $10,000 as the bounty by the government in order to, as they see it, basically stop as many abortions as possible. This is it's literally unconstitutional. It's counter to versus Wade. And the Supreme Court, in a ruling, a 5-4 ruling here, has not really offered much information as to why they came to the decision. I mean, we know why they came to the decision. It's just that they just basically said, no, we're not going to strike it down, and that's it. Normally, they issue 100+ page documents explaining their reasoning. On this, they were just like, no, we're not cool. So that's it. So we know why they didn't really have much to offer as far as a majority opinion goes there, because it's unconstitutional. What are they going to say? What are they going to say precedent wise that's going to back up their ruling here? The less they say, the better, basically, because if you actually look into Roe versus Wade, this is literally unconstitutional. So, but we're going to go to Nightmare Fuel here, Spook Fuel, Spooky Nookies, Reese. But before we do that, I do just want to say, obviously, we're not streaming to YouTube yet. The channel should be ready for streaming to within about 2 days from now on YouTube. We're streaming to Twitch and Periscope right now. If you haven't done so yet, check out my new channel while we're waiting on the old one. And that's Superpower Broadcasting. Basically, my main channel got temporarily taken down as a result of fascists filing frivolous copyright claims against me over TikToks that we reacted to, featuring a fascist in a maid outfit, talking about how he supports the murder of atheists. So, going to be posting the channel link here, and so go take a look at that. And basically, do you have anything else to add, Spooky Nookies, before we get into the Texas Taliban?
On that bit, I'd just say, most people listening will have subscribed. There's been a good surge over there so far, and in the coming days, I expect to see that to grow, and that'll be good, and that's definitely appreciated. It lets you know that a lot of people in even just the wider political community, and this didn't surprise me either, they don't support censorship. They don't support deplatforming. A lot of the people in question who I'm thinking of, this is their career. They understand how easy it would be to screw everything over. So they look at this, and no matter how much they've disagreed with content on your channel in the past, there is that level of sympathy there, and I think that's good. I think this is the kind of thing that really brings serious content creators together in a way that's perhaps even stronger than ideology or commonality.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. I mean, isn't it kind of incredible that that basically people that we disagree with on a preponderance of issues, liberal internationalists, even socialists by and large, that those people are better allies in the fight for free speech and for actually having debates. I'm thinking about people like obviously Dylan Burns and Prime Kai here, who they're actually about having serious debates as opposed to nominally hawks that used to be obviously featured on the channel, that kind of stuff. I mean, it is kind of amazing just how toxic conservatives hawks are compared to non-hawk leftists by and large. It's kind of remarkable. I mean, there used to be a time when it was the other way around, I guess, on the internet, where it would have been, people that were pretty left wing trying to get everybody else shut down. Now, obviously, in the wake of the Crowder uh, phenomenon, refusing to debate Sam Cedar, these guys, I guess they just feel empowered to try to shut down their opposition. They've just taken the mask off. They feel like, well, we don't actually have to debate anymore. We don't actually have to come to terms with our opponent's criticism. We can just go full fash. And this goes back to what I've been saying for a while, which is that these people, they're never actually free speech. Like Nick Fuentes is never actually free speech. He'll straight up admit he only uses the free speech argument so that they can get sympathy and get power, and then they can have their opponents executed. So they don't actually believe in that. And it's really as simple as that. And I mean, Hitler was a war hawk, Mussolini was a war hawk, as we've talked about before. Being a hawk, obviously, it's not good enough. It really depends on what you're advocating to promote abroad. And these people, they have the same social values as Viktor Orban and Vladimir Putin. The only reason why they'll claim that they're against Russia is because they were born in the US and they root for the US just the same way that they would root for their local sports team. They don't actually believe in American values. They are like the American Taliban, the same way as these losers in Texas right now
Hmm.
and at the Supreme Court, that they do constitute the American Taliban. This is something that Dylan Burns was talking about today, actually, was that is it funny how a lot of these people that are criticizing Biden right now over his handling of Afghanistan, they want to do Taliban shit in America? And he's like, he was making the point that a lot of these people, they can't be taken seriously because they have that double standard. And I'm in the chat and I'm like, well, I'm a feminist and I'm a war hawk. So, what do you do that? What do you do that? Right. So,
At that
yeah.
point, you get to be the exception. A lot of people fall into this trap where they just advocate for partisan positions, and it really gets them nowhere. But in terms of that, there's a lot to talk about. I know we're gonna try to keep this short, so
Yeah, we gotta
we'll
keep it
hit
short
these as
tonight. Yeah.
we'll hit these as kind of bullet points. There was a lot of outrage on Twitter for a number of reasons. One of which was the comparison to the Taliban or the mentioning of Sharia law. Now, here's where that gets a little interesting. I think that the comparison to the Taliban in terms of this issue is is a fine comparison, really. Although I suppose even in some cases you could argue that the Taliban's a bit more lenient when it comes to abortion, which is not a good look for Texas.
Yeah,
When
yeah.
it Sharia law can get a little complicated because it refers to, it's kind of an umbrella term referring to systems of governance in dozens of nations, and these are wildly different legal systems, different interpretations, different jurists involved there. But for the most part, shock to absolutely no one, basically restrictive abortion laws across the board. Some are a bit more lenient than others. Turkey is an example of that. Say what you will about them, they're a bit more lenient than some of these other nations. But that is not to excuse them, because those are definitely undeniably misogynistic systems. They have a hierarchy in place. But I think it's more a case that if you have a system of Sharia that ends up being, I would say inadvertently more feminist than Texas, that doesn't reflect well on the Sharia system. That actually reflects badly on Texas, and that's where we're at. You mentioned earlier the ratting out, because obviously that's what this is referring to. The state wasn't going to go through with enforcing this necessarily. The risk was that private citizens would now be free to engage in these lawsuits, and obviously they'd have a lot of big um, pro-life groups and money behind them to do so. But that was the risk, that they were going to come forward and they were going to start suing people, and not just people getting the abortions, but people involved in any way. What's interesting though is that people have set up these websites. They're asking for anonymous tips, for people to be ratted out and to be summarily punished. And a lot of people have found these sites and have taken to submitting fake leads. So if you want to do something, this is my advice to you: find these sites. Maybe I'll try to post some later on Twitter.
Oh man.
But find
Oh
these
man.
sites and post as many fake leads. Fuck with these people, because
Yeah.
fuck them. They're
Yes,
garbage.
dude. Yes, dude. No. But you know the same thing. I said the same thing to Burns earlier because he was advocating for this. I'm like, in before the state of Texas sues all of us for obstruction of justice. you know, because
Oh,
literally
don't give them ideas.
that's what they're gonna say. You know how it's like, you've got like, say you've got like a road stop up ahead or whatever, checking people, their breathalyzers, that kind of stuff. And you tell people like a few hundred meters up, you're like, oh yeah, you might not want to go that way. You can actually be arrested for obstruction of justice, for tipping people off. Likewise here, I'm sure they or some other radical Texan Taliban Christian group are going to file civil suits or even bring in criminal law for obstruction of justice of sorts in the matter. So I'm almost certain that they're going to do that. Now, are they going to go after this show? Probably not. This is tiny. Are they going to go after Dylan Burns? Probably not. Are they going to go after somebody in the next few months? Probably, for doing that. But if a ton of people do it, it's going to be impossible to sue everybody. It's the point. It's going to be impossible to file charges against everybody for obstruction of justice. Honestly, at that point, you're going to be famous anyway if they decide to prosecute you, and you probably be able to raise legal funds off of the name recognition and everything, and off of the sympathy that the majority of people would have with you, because again, it's unconstitutional, and and it's basically Texas trying to be as much as of a rogue state as possible. And in this case, they actually have the endorsement of the Supreme Court by a slim margin. But that's what happens. That's what happens when you get to
That's all it
appoint
takes.
three Supreme Court judges under the Trump administration. And Jimmy Dore said that it was impossible. He said that it was impossible that Trump would get two. He said that it was impossible that Trump would get two. He said that there was a higher chance of the moon falling into Lake Michigan than Trump getting to appoint 2 or 3 Supreme Court justices, and he got to appoint 3. So,
And the moon is still in the sky. When I go out at night, I see this thing moon.
When it's
every
dark
night.
outside, when it's dark outside, you see this.
When it's
You
dark.
see this thing moon.
So I'm pretty, as if we needed more evidence for that, we can pretty safely discount Jimmy Dore's political analysis. There's a lot of that. A lot of this, people didn't understand really the importance of that election. And they have no excuse, because it's not like they were someone who was just getting politically involved. Like, that was right around the time I'd say that I was really just getting politically involved. You have a right to, for a period, to have some bad takes, but if you're Jimmy Dore, at that point, you're a man in your late 40s. you do political commentary, on mostly American politics, you should know better. You should absolutely know better. So shame on him. He's an idiot, obviously. And they didn't, they, I, you have to wonder if it's stupidity or if it was, purposeful gaslighting in a lot of cases. Because people dug up a lot of tweets from Brianna Joy Gray today, some real bad takes from 2016. And she actually, she was getting so much flack for them. She deleted some of them where basically she was saying, look, abortion rights, that's not a feminist issue. They were pulling up all these old interviews of Bernie downplaying the issue entirely, basically going on these interviews and trying to form the Red Brown Alliance. Like,
that's
look,
what I was
man,
gonna say.
we just care about the issues that affect the working man, man.
That's it. That's the same Tucker thing. That's the shoe on head thing. The idea is that LGBTQ plus rights do not matter. Abortion rights do not matter. All that matters is my economics, my minimum wage, my workers' rights. Unless you happen to be a sex worker, then fuck you. That's how these people are. And I'm telling you, these people, what's the meme? Class reductionists. That's literally what it is. And they exist on the conservative side and they exist on the progressive side. And these people, the reason why they do this, and I'm just guessing here, in the case of Brianna Joy Gray and in the case of Bernie, it's obviously very different with Jimmy Dore. But in the case of Bernie Sanders and Brianna Joy Gray, based on what I've seen of them, and I'm more familiar with Bernie. I've followed Bernie, his activities and many of his interviews for years. I used to watch Young Turks for like almost 10 years straight every day. I really do believe that Bernie would be pro-choice, like on a personal level, but they have to find common ground with the conservatives if they want to get their Fox News appearances. So that's what they have to do. They have to do the Big Ten strategy and bring them in. I'm pretty sure Brianna Joy Gray and Bernie personally are pro-choice, but they don't think of it as that big enough of a deal because to them, my minimum wage and my endless wars is a bigger problem than fighting the Taliban at home. I mean, is it any surprise they don't want to fight the Taliban at home? They don't want to fight the Taliban in Afghanistan. So, of course, they don't want to fight the Taliban at home. So, they don't want to fight the Taliban, and they don't want to fight the TEXAN Taliban. And Jimmy Dore is a little bit different because Jimmy Dore is a conservative. He's an economically socialist conservative. So, and the idea that Trump couldn't appoint 2 Supreme Court justices, I'll tell you, I don't think that he believed that was true. Because in that interview where he was saying that, he was talking to Sam Cedar, and he was saying to Sam Cedar how, you want me to vote for Hillary Clinton, you want me to vote for World War III in Syria, all this kind of stuff. He's like saying, and then he goes to say how you can't, like there's a smaller chance that Trump appoints 2 or 3 Supreme Court justices than the moon falls into Lake Michigan. That was the interview that Burns had played earlier to highlight Jimmy Dore's stance on this. And the thing is, does Jimmy Dore actually believe that? I don't think so. But the thing is, for him, all he cares about is Syria. All he cares about is defending Bashar the Butcher. So he's going to say anything possible to downplay the importance of voting for Hillary Clinton. But you and I both know that if Hillary Clinton had won right now, this wouldn't be happening. The Supreme Court would be incredibly liberal. There'd only be a couple conservative justices on it right now. So, and Syria would almost certainly be liberated years ago. ISIS would
could have been.
Yeah. Turkey would be out of there. They never would have been able to go in and butcher the Kurds. Rojava would be a thing. I mean, the world would be a very different place, right?
And it would, that would obviously have
America would still be in Afghanistan.
That's true. A very different world indeed. And she most likely would have got 2 terms. So we would still be, we'd just be at the beginning of the second term, and there would be a lot more to come there. What could have been, but sadly wasn't. And there would have been long-term effects in the Middle East. There would have been a lot of long-term effects here as well. I'm tripping over my words a little bit as well, because I truly think that if you had secured a Supreme Court that wasn't just a bunch of hacky activist judges, or people who were actually interested in upholding precedent, were actually interested in reading the Constitution and interpreting it as a living document in terms of applying to modern problems, as is what you're supposed to do anyway, then I would be very comfortable voting for Republicans here and there. Like that sounds almost ironic to say, but when it comes to the executive branch, they obviously deal with domestic concerns as well, but it's a lot of foreign policy when it comes to them, and they tend to be more hawkish. So if we had that situation where you had this secure Supreme Court, and it came down to vote for Dan Crenshaw, I would have a lot less concerns about that. A lot less moral qualms on my mind. Now, would I still do it? It really depends. It really does depend on what he says. The answer is probably yes, especially if he was running against Biden. So let's just put it that way. But he's not going to do that, so it's kind of a meaningless hypothetical anyway. That's a funny comment. I wouldn't call pro-life feminists internalized misogynists.
Well, that's what I had said earlier on Twitter.
There's no such thing as a pro-life feminist. That's not. So why are we even using such a term?
It's not a thing. Well, they'll try to gaslight you on is they'll say, and to be clear, this is a troll, but there are people that will make this argument, unironically. They'll say, well, the majority of aborted fetuses are females, and they'll cite China, for example, and say that if you're pro-life, you'd have to, if you're a feminist, you should be pro-life because the majority of aborted fetuses are female. As far as the U.S. goes, it's basically 50-50. It's a non-talking point within American and Canadian politics. But what's incredible about this, though, is that the pro-life feminist thing, that's the smaller part. The part that is taken issue with here, and again, this is a troll, this is Boom and Truman, but there are people who were unironically at me over this on Twitter today. What they will say is, internalized misogynists. What do you mean? There are women that support pro-life stuff in Texas. It's like, yeah, they were brainwashed to be Christians who think they're going to burn in hell if they don't let a bunch of old men basically dictate and in many cases, old dead men too, dictate how everybody's supposed to live. So it's internalized misogyny. It's the same way that a lot of people in the countryside in Afghanistan support the Taliban. Well, a lot of those people are women too. They've been brought up their whole life to believe that if they don't, if they don't cover up and everything, it's not just that they're going to be beaten in the streets by the Taliban. It's that they're going to be strung up and roasted for eternity in Jahannam. So for these people, you say, oh, well, they support the Taliban. It's like, yeah, that's Stockholm syndrome. Like, okay, that is internalized misogyny. I mean, you can be a woman who hates women and disempowers women. That's not something that can't exist. That can obviously exist. And you don't need a gun held to their head to do it if they're sufficiently inculcated into your propaganda and your ideology, as such as in the case of Christianity in Texas, or Sunni Islam in the case of the Taliban. So, I mean, but that shouldn't be complicated. Like, I mean, those are questions, those are comprehension issues that you would expect would be reasonable to explain to a 14-year-old or a 15-year-old. Yet there are 25-year-olds and up that will be stunned and can't understand that. And they'll display that ignorance on the internet for everybody to see. You look at this and you're like, how can you have such a basic comprehension of sociology. That's incredible. Like, I took 2 sociology classes, but I was aware of this before I even started university, that was a thing. Internalized hatred. That's a thing in the Black community too. And then likewise, that's a thing in Western society. Internalized defeatism, internalized hatred. We think of ourselves as the bad guys. Oftentimes, people will make an Orientalist argument. They'll talk about how, oh, well, we can't tell the Taliban what to do. Who are we to say? Because they have their culture and we have our culture. Or, oh, we got attacked on 9/11. We deserve that. Or, Japan attacked America on December 7th, 1941. Well, America deserved it because America refused to trade with Japan over their barbarity in Asia. So those are all cases of people being Americans or being Westerners and acting against their own interests because they've been brainwashed and inculcated into an anti-Western ideology where they're brought up to hate themselves and think of themselves as the bad guy. So the idea that that can't happen with women, that's absurd. We see this happen on a foreign policy level every day with people in the West acting against their own interests to say that we're the bad guys and the people that aim nukes at us are the good guys. So that's the case with North Korea. That's the case with Russia. That's the case with China from various different people on the political spectrum. No, so it's a joke. So it's a joke. So absolutely, if you're a woman out there and you're supporting this, yeah, that's internalized misogyny. It's as simple as that. It's not a complicated subject either. It's not a complicated thing to understand. And then what's funny is a lot of those people that will say that they have such a hard time, they'll have such a hard time understanding that. They'll talk about things like class consciousness, or false consciousness. And they'll point out, how, oh, well, poor people support capitalism because of class consciousness. Yet these people will be stunned and have a hard time comprehending internalized misogyny. Internalized misogyny is an equivalent to false consciousness, except the difference is it's more important and it's more problematic because capitalism isn't evil, whereas misogyny is evil. So
I gotcha. There's a couple things on that. I generally think that anybody not understanding the meaning of internalized misogyny or internalized hatred, generally they're full of shit, because they will absolutely make the case in other situations when they talk about certain male feminists. They'll say, well, look, they're misandrous. Like, so they'll understand the concept there that, okay, there's these men, and what their entire identity is they hate men, despite the fact that they're men. Oh, mind blown. So yeah, there are women like that, and they can support policies that greatly clamp down on their reproductive rights. I actually did kind of want to divert the conversation to a bit of a foreign policy angle just for a minute, because obviously it's relevant to the content that we're most known for producing. But what was interesting today on Twitter was a lot of the whinging over the Taliban comparisons. And I did see a lot of that. It is basically what you were referencing earlier. A lot of people saying, well, look at what's happening in Texas. How can we judge the Taliban? Or, man, women have lost their rights in Texas, not in Afghanistan. I'm looking at this and it's like, okay, look, you want to call them the Texan Taliban. People like Abbott, people like Cruz, that's fine with me. Yeah. I'm totally fine with that, because I don't think, all comparisons need to be exact letter for letter. And I don't think it's a false equivalence either, because I think that removed from the context of a rule of law society, those guys would basically be the Taliban. So in that sense, I don't think it's a false equivalence. However, these situations are not remotely comparable. Let's not get it twisted. Texas, for as much of it as it's arguably the worst state, is a much more preferable place to be than Afghanistan. And all this does is shred people's credibility when it comes to talking about foreign affairs in general. And a lot of people saying things like that, they supported the withdrawal, like they supported turning their backs on tens of millions of innocent people, and they really don't have much room to talk. No, this is not worse than Afghanistan. Afghanistan actually has it worse in terms of women's rights right now. Kind of painful that needs to be said.
Yeah.
But look where we are.
Yeah. No, we got Jay here right now, and he says, "Are you not streaming to your new YouTube channel? It took 24 hours just to be able to have a verification code where it would work for me to enter in the code that they sent me. Now it's going to take up to 48 hours to be able to actually get the destination streaming to work. So 72 hours to be able to stream over there. But definitely be sure to go and subscribe to my new channel. And I'll post the link in the chat right now. And yeah.
I will. That's
I did want to say
it's a work in progress.
Yeah, no, I did want to say as well, though, there was somebody who pointed out, and actually, before I do that, I should also mention a shout out to Vernon Sherman, who sent me a $50 tip today. Thank you to Vernon Sherman for that. We have a new goal out over on Ko-Fi now for September. So if you could check that out, I'd appreciate it. But yeah, thank you to Vernon Sherman. We're going to get on to the next issue, which was that there was somebody who brought up in your comments on the stream that we did last night, and they were saying, well, fortunately, Kevin prepared for this. And that's true. That's absolutely true. This is something that I've been telling content creators and people I know and stuff for a long time, which is that make sure that you back up everything. Now, I've been too busy to actually back up my stuff beforehand on, BitChute or Odyssey or a burner YouTube account. But I do have the content at least. It's just going to take a few months to get everything uploaded to the new channel again. But we do have 2 terabytes of streams and videos that exist on 3 separate hard drives. So that's thanks to everybody who funded the hard drives and everything over the last couple of years. So we have the content. That's not gone. Only a little bit of the content's actually gone, and that's the early stuff that people didn't really watch anyway. So that's going to exist, and yeah. So it's a slight hiccup in the short run. Even in the worst case scenario where we don't get the old channel back, though, it basically means that we're down about 700 subs that we've got to make up as soon as possible. But again, this is a 50-year project, so that's not that big of a holdup in the long run. But it should be noted, these fascists and reactionaries and conservatives do not believe in free speech. Never allow them to gaslight you on free speech. They don't believe in it. They never have. They never will. They're fascists. They're only interested in shutting down their opposition by any means necessary. That's it. So.
Yeah, you were saying earlier. It would seem that a lot of people were emboldened by the Steven Crowder, Sam Cedar situation. But I think I'd more say it's a case where they understand a basic truth that you've laid out, that they are not going to win this. They're not going to win the culture war. This is actually the only option left. Well, yeah, I'm not going to go on, because the thing is, those guys who flagged you down falsely and gloated about it and saw this as some major victory, a lot of them had, come on to debate you. Some of them tricked their way on to debate you. They tried that. That didn't work out so well for them. They ended up looking like a bunch of idiots. And they made no points. They were, I wasted hours of my life watching these retards. Oh, gotta watch my word.
TOS.
Watching these special individuals flail around, attempting to make points, not really, at the end of the day. And so they tried that. They saw that got them nowhere. They basically realized that they'd become memes. So, well, this is what's left. This is the only option left. And that is the state of affairs. Now, does that mean, platform people like this? No, not necessarily. There's really no need for that. They're not relevant beyond harassing us. Special intellectuals. Yep, very special. I'm gonna have to watch my words. But hey, man, it is what it is. I will. Okay, so there was one more point about the Taliban comparison I wanted to mention, because a lot of people will call it a false equivalence, but I'll tell you another reason why I'm actually in favor of it. Because what it does is it forces Americans to come to terms with the fact that the Taliban are not our friends. They're in fact an enemy. At a time when the UK and the US, it even seems like, is moving toward normalizing relations with the Taliban to some degree. I think that's very important. And it might seem a little silly. Oh, it's just a little hashtag. What does it really matter? I don't want people to forget that the Taliban are bad just because we're out of there for the time being. We're out of Afghanistan. We're going to have to go back. But people should not forget. So if that's what it takes for some people, now granted, that is a sad state of affairs. When in order to believe the Taliban are bad, somebody needs to compare them to Greg Abbott. But hey, man, that's just how it works for some people. So hey, if that helps you in terms of understanding foreign policy, like, oh well, I was about to do apologetics for the Taliban, but then they got compared to Greg Abbott. I don't like him very much, so therefore I don't like the Taliban. It's like, well, yeah, it's kind of an understatement, but there you go. I guess if that's what it took. But obviously, for people who were informed, such reasoning may seem a bit painful. That is the state of American, domestic politics, though. A lot of these people who talk about these issues, especially when we weigh in, this is a larger pool of people involved in the discourse. They don't talk about foreign affairs, and when they do, all they really say is, "Well, end the wars, potholes," and that's sad. But not to discount talking about these issues at home, because they're obviously important. But I don't want people to get so lost in it that they end up discounting the oppression that other people are facing that is far worse than the oppression that they themselves will be facing. Now, it's not to take away from the situation that anybody finds themselves in now. I understand, and I have a lot of sympathy for that. And I think that, there are steps that can be taken to challenge it. I was just saying on Twitter, I really hope Biden does an executive order, but he's not going to. He's absolutely not going to. If he does, he cares a lot more, as evidenced by some other actions as of late. He cares a lot more about his career, and I suppose his legacy of being this deal maker, of being this bipartisan beacon, than actually, playing it close to the chest, risking it all, even for the sake of a couple of years while he's still in office. Yes, I understand the risk there is that an executive order could be overturned, but what it could do is it could buy time for Congress to actually pass through some new legislation that wouldn't allow this situation to repeat itself. That is what I would ask of Joe Biden to do right now. But you know why he's not going to do that? Because he's a pro-life Catholic. He'll do the circuit, the media circuit. He'll do the whinging. He'll tell you, "Oh, this is bad. Oh, my heart really goes out."
Pro-choice? Isn't that the whole reason why Catholics hate him? Is that he calls himself a pro-choice Catholic?
The thing is, not really. He's pro-choice, but he leans toward being, the more pro-life side of pro-choice. He himself, he thinks it's wrong, but he generally is supportive of, the option being there. But at the end of the day, is he really going to go fighting for this? Now, I could be wrong, and I really hope that I'm proven wrong. But no, I don't think I'm going to be. He's not a man of action. So he's going to give some thoughts and prayers, which he's already done. And then he's probably going to move on to something else. And this will just be the state of affairs for a while, until it's revisit it, or maybe Congress will take it on, upon themselves to actually deal with it themselves. But the problem there is that anything that goes through Congress eventually makes its way to Biden, and we'll see what he eventually decides on. But I have very little faith in him on this issue. Very little faith. He's better. I'll grant you that he's better than an Amy Coney Barrett. He's better than a Brett Kavanaugh. But is he my ideal president? Absolutely not. Have you heard any of my commentary on the guy over the past couple months? He's far from the ideal. My ideal was Hillary Clinton, and guess what? You fucker stole that from me.
Yeah.
And I'm salty about it. I still am, because that would have been, we mentioned it earlier, a very different world, a world with so few of the problems that we're currently talking about. I long for that world. We were so close, and but we didn't do it. Why? Because of WikiLeaks, and because she's a feminist, and people at the time. Oh, in World War III, how could I forget?
World War III in Syria, man, because Russia was totally going to start a nuclear war. Oh, man.
Any day now. Any day.
You just like how they started a nuclear war after Turkey shut down their shit, right?
Yeah, that was World War III. And then there was World War IV. And World War V is currently happening. It's the worst one yet.
Yeah. No, it's really bad. Yeah, World War V is where the U.S. pulls out of Afghanistan.
Yeah, it's not an ideal situation. But I do think that there are ways that people
wait. There's some dude absolutely spazzing outside right now. I just want to listen to what they're saying. Is that Hawes? I don't think it's. No. There's some dude outside absolutely chimping out right now. Like just in the streets, like losing it, like howling, screaming, yelling.
Maybe it is Hawes. That kind of sounds like him.
That could be
Monkey
Hawes.
Man.
So there's an update to everybody. I'm going to be debating Hawes Tuesday night, 6 p.m. Pacific. It's actually happening. So, are you getting real life trolled? Well, I mean, did I get trolled or did he get trolled? He had to drive 3,000 kilometers to come and yell outside my house? Okay. I think he might miss his stream tomorrow. Does he have something planned with Comrade King? I heard he had something planned with Comrade King.
Fucking goddamn it. The audacity.
The audacity.
Classic.
No, I'm pretty sure that's Hawes. Just that, like screaming at the moon. It's dark out right now, so you just see this moon.
That is generally when you see it. Although you can see it during the day too, so it's a bit misleading.
No, I was told you can only see the moon when it's dark outside.
Oh man, that is quite the hypothesis. We'll have to test that out sometime.
Yeah. Yeah, there we go.
So anyway, did you? I guess did we want to get a final thoughts on this issue?
Yeah. Basically, I think it's really sad. I can't imagine being that kid's parents and watching him turn into this, But I'll be debating him Tuesday night, and I expect to destroy him. So, what a problem child. You got any thoughts on the issue?
For me, on the Texas Taliban, obviously this has been a story for a while. This was a fear, and truthfully, this is a fear always in the back of my mind. And anytime an election rolls around, anytime a Supreme Court nomination rolls around, and this is going to be a trend that continues in other states like Mississippi. They have a ban, not as severe, strangely enough, but this is a move that will greatly embolden a lot of those lawmakers. It is, by definition, unconstitutional. It undermines previous precedent set by the court, and as a result, a lot of other states are going to follow suit, and that's the problem there. It becomes this balancing act of, I'm not really an absolutist either way when it comes to state rights or federal rights. I'm not one of these like whinging like legal bros who's going to go on and be like, well, things always have to be one way or the other, and you always have to respect this. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I respect people's self-autonomy. I respect their liberty, and whatever body can guarantee that the best is what I'll support. If that means the state, or if that means the federal government, that is what it is. Because I think that in this case, there were elements of both that failed severely, both in
Yes.
terms of Texas legislators and the Supreme Court. So, what it goes to show you is that it's important on all levels of government to determine the best leadership that will actually preserve liberties of the populace. And we haven't done a very good job of that as of late. I'm sad to report. And some of that is related to voter suppression. So, hey, looking at you again, Texas. So a lot of these issues work hand in hand. And, you know, they're really confident that going into the next midterms, that the Republicans are going to handily win. I would be a little wary before calling that one, because it's bullshit like this that's going to get people to turn out to vote in record numbers. No matter how long you make them wait in line without anybody coming by with the water bottles. No matter how many ropes you put up to prevent these people from having their voices heard and to make any kind of meaningful change in society, enough is enough. Half of our population is being targeted and is under attack and is going to be harassed at some of their most vulnerable and heartbreaking at times moments. That's completely unacceptable. Yes, there's a lot of problems abroad. There's a lot to talk about in terms of that, and often we'll highlight national security. But every now and then, something like this will happen when you do have to adjust course just a little bit and say, what is it that you value at the end of the day? I see this happening. I see the intentional targeting of half the people I know, half the people in my life, half the people in this country. And that's not fucking okay. That will not be tolerated. And, you know, a lot of they could go with that obstruction of justice route. I say, people, be willing to fall on the sword. They can't arrest all of you. They can't sue all of you. These are the actions that you have to take. And no one said it was going to be without risk. But the thing is, no matter what, there's risk involved now, because women are still going to be getting abortions in Texas.
Absolutely.
And that's just a reality. So
And
I
it's
think
going to
that
be more dangerous. Yeah.
people should be willing to fall on the sword, do everything in your power to, you know, legally, with the possible exception of this, you know, minor whatever. That's something that can be sorted out in a court, and that's for you to determine if that's something that you think is worth engaging in. I think that it would be insane, honestly, if they pursued people for that. But then again, think about who we're talking about.
Yeah.
That
No,
is the current state of affairs in America, and we'll see how other states follow suit. Definitely keep an eye on Mississippi, and you know, probably probably states of that sort. But who knows? It could really happen anywhere.
yeah, absolutely. So thank you for tuning in, everybody. I obviously on this, I support abortion rights. I think that what's happened now is complete grotesque behavior from the Supreme Court, where they're not ruling based on the actual Constitution. They're just ruling on their own convictions. And that's what happens. So elections have consequences. People fear mongered about how, oh, yeah, elections have consequences. You vote for Hillary Clinton and you're going to get World War III. But instead, we got an absolute bloodbath across the Middle East and Central Asia because of anti-war policies, and we got an absolute shit show domestically within the United States as a result of Trump being able to appoint 3 conservative justices. So, yeah, elections have consequences. We should have had Hillary Clinton. We could have avoided Donnie Yes Sir Vladimir Trump and White Flag Joe. So we got the shitty alternate universe. There's a better universe out there, and we didn't get it. So that's thanks to losers like Jimmy Dore, Kremlin Kyle, Abby Martin, Tanky Tulsi, and their ilk, and of course the Kremlin and the Internet Research Agency in St. Petersburg. So yeah, our enemies are better at producing memes to swindle over the American public than the Warhawks have been. But we're doing our best. We're taking back the culture, and they aren't going to win this in the long run. Just as the losers who have temporarily taken down my main channel won't win in the long run, the conservatives on the culture war are going to lose. They're going to get beat the fuck out. They get beat the fuck out every generation, and they have to switch their viewpoints. Now they're like, oh, we have conservatives out there now like CTV who just embrace pot. That never used to be a thing. So that's how much the Overton window shifts with each generation. And in a couple generations of conservatism, it's going to be a conservative thing to defend trans rights, for example. And there'll be some other stupid shit that they're spazzing over. But we're the ones who move the trajectory. We're the ones who move the battle lines, and it's always in their court. So, and they have to clamor to get small wins like this one in Texas that aren't even constitutional. And absolutely, Joe Biden should be ashamed for his weakness as usual. But that's about everything that we have for you tonight. Subscribe to Spooky Nukies on YouTube at Spooky Nukies, and subscribe to my new channel. It's got the same name, Superpower Broadcasting. I mean, have the link in the chat, and you can also find the link on my Twitter. And yeah, be sure to follow me on Twitter at Kevin Castley. And if you want to support what I do, check me out over on Patreon, PayPal, and Ko-Fi. The links are in the About segment of my new channel and in the description of videos that are going to be uploaded to that channel. So have a good night, everybody. Take care and stay based.
Thanks for coming by.